Hey, greetings good people and welcome to a new video. Last time we saw each other, I think we were talking about the RTX 3070 over here, and I've actually unboxed this card and gave you my first impressions, but a lot of you have asked me to do a full review of this graphics card, so I thought why not do that by also using my old GTX 1070 from which I upgraded, so you could get an idea of what performance looks like when you're upgrading from a GTX 1070 to an RTX 3070 like mine in this case. So before we begin this video, I also would like to point out that only about 10% of you who watch this video are actually subscribed. So if you happen to enjoy the content that I make around here, and if you happen to find this review useful, then I would recommend you hit that subscribe button and perhaps leave a comment and tell me what other content I should make around here, because that would be very much appreciated. Now, other than that, I think I should tell you that I have timestamps all across this video, so if there are any particular things which you would like to see in this video, so if you're only here for the benchmarks, then you can just skip to that part. However, I would have to tell you that if you watch the entire review, you're actually going to get a better idea at these results and you're going to understand more of what's going on in this video. But let's go and talk about what I've been using those cards on. So I have in my Fractal Design Core 3000 case, very old one, I have an Intel Core i7 8700K clocked at 4.7 gigahertz, and the reason for which I left it at 4.7 gigahertz is that it delivers very similar performance to what you could get from a Zen 2 CPU from AMD. I'm obviously not comparing it to Zen 3 because those CPUs just blow it out of the water, and I have it on a Z370 Prime A motherboard from ASUS, and I'm using a Noctua NHD 14 cooler to cool it off, and I also have inside the case 4 different Arctic Freezer P12 PWM fans, because those are amazing. You should definitely check them out. And inside it I also have 2 terabytes of SSD storage. I have a 960 EVO and a Kingston K2000, and I'm also using some 2 or 3 other hard drives. Spinning rust, it's always good to have if you have to store a lot of games, and it's all being powered by my trusty Seasonic 650 watt power supply. Now, in terms of methodology, I need you guys to know that I've tested over 15 different games across 2 very different resolutions, and I'm going to get into that. Now, I've tested games which I think the average gamer might want to play with those cards, and I have not included Red Dead Redemption or Call of Duty Modern Warfare just yet, and that's not because I don't own the games, it's just that it's been impossible to download all of those games on my storage because I have other things, and aside from that, I'm still using dial-up here in Germany, so the internet is very slow, as you might know if you're from Germany. However, I did include some other titles that are either demanding or buggy, so Horizon Zero Dawn in this case, and also Crysis Remastered, so you could still get a good idea of how these cards actually perform. Now, for benchmarking, I've used CapFrame X, which is an amazing tool, so props to the developers over there, and I have to tell you that this tool is pretty much the Swiss Army knife of benchmarking tools. Now, I haven't been able to capture gameplay footage whilst benchmarking, and that's not because I was too lazy, but mainly because I don't have a capture card or a second monitor, second PC, which could take all of this footage without affecting the benchmarks. But I think you guys are still going to be happy by simply seeing the average FPS and the 1% lows out of that. So let's talk about resolution, because I was telling you I tested 2 different resolutions. However, I've included a third one as well. But the main ones are 1080p, so 1920 by 1080, which is pretty much the average resolution, the most common resolution, should I say, in this case. I've also tested a 2560 by 1080 resolution, and that's because behind me I have a 34-inch monitor from LG, this being the LG 34GL750 if you're interested. It's an IPS monitor, it's G-Sync compatible, and it does have 144 Hz, which is very important if you're an FPS fan like me. What else could I say about it? Yes, so it's also important to note that I've tested the games at the highest fidelity settings, so those are kind of the worst possible results that you could get out of those cards. So if you were to lower them to medium or below settings, you're actually going to see a higher increase in FPS, but obviously I've done that just so you could get an idea of how these graphics cards perform and not how my CPU performs in this case. The third resolution, I don't think I mentioned it, is 5120 by 2160, which, believe it or not, is actually 2.8 million pixels more than 4K. Now, I wasn't able to test at 1440p, so 2560 by 1440, 3440 by 1440p, and 4K in this case. Sadly, I tried using NVIDIA's dynamic super resolution. However, it did not perform all that well with all kinds of games, so I was like, you know what, I'll stick to the resolutions which I can actually run it at, and then I'll do some further testing and investigation. So if there are any particular games and resolutions at which you would like me to test the RTX 3070, then just sound off in the comments down below. Now, other things to point out are that if you see if you see some different results from other tech reviewers, then you should probably note that I only have an 8700K in this case, and it also depends on the of whether they have run those games with the built-in benchmarks or with very different scenarios. In my case, and the games that don't have built-in benchmarks, I tried using scenarios where you would get the lowest FPS. So I do know that Metro Exodus has a built-in benchmark, but I tried using something more accurate, which is the Caspian border map. So if you play around in the beginning, that's where you're going to be seeing the lowest FPS, unless you go up the range over there, if you know what I'm talking about. If not, then that's still fine. You should probably see some B-roll of it. So yeah, not very different. I also tried looking at some benchmarks myself, and they are not very different than other tech reviewers, but like I said, if they are, then they probably use some other benchmarks. They probably have more experience than I do, and they might also have an Anthony, and sadly I wasn't able to get my hands on an Anthony on lttstore.com, so you know, it is what it is. I was the only one running those benchmarks, so sorry. In this recording, it happens that I get a ton of messages, so I'm being distracted. Let's see if there is anything important. No, but now I think it's also time to tell you that I've also benchmarked ray tracing performance on the RTX 3070. I was not going to test that on the 1070 because you can't in most game titles, and I've also tested NVIDIA's DLSS, and I gotta tell you, it's amazing. So deep learning super sampling, we need this in pretty much all games because it's going to make it very amazing. So AMD, what you're doing with Fidelity FX, come on, we need that really soon. We're going to be talking about Big Navi closer to the end of this video as well, because this launched. So some of you have also asked me about noise level performance, and I did look out for that. Undervolting, overclocking. I did run all of those tests at base frequencies and, well, the normal boost frequencies, like at which the cards are boosting and whatnot. So I've not done any different testing depending on the undervolting or overclocking results that I have, but you are going to be able to see those closer to the end of the video, just to see what you can expect from the RTX 3070. So I think now it's time to finally look at the benchmarks, but like I was saying, I encourage you to also watch some very different videos from other reviewers testing the RTX 3070 just to get the full picture at what this graphics card can do for you. So let's start. Starting off with the GTX 1070 benchmarks at 1080p, you can see that CSGO and Apex Legends run at pretty much the most decent frame rates you can get out of the card while still running at the highest settings possible, so you're definitely not going to have any issues over there. But looking at some other AAA titles, you're going to see that you're not necessarily hitting 60 FPS all the time. However, if you are willing to lower your settings, you're still going to get some very playable refresh rates. So moving on to the RTX 3070 benchmarks that you are here for, you can see that everything you throw at it, even at the highest settings, is going to run very smoothly. I do recommend playing Ghost Runner and Godfall with this card because you're going to be really impressed. Now moving back to the GTX 1070 at 1080p, I've thrown some other game titles at it, some of them that are very well optimized, just like Doom or Doom Eternal, and also some others that aren't playing that well with this card, this being Metro Exodus. But like I was saying, I've only tested the Caspian border map region. However, if you go into other sections of the game, you're going to see this card run at easily at 80-90 FPS, because that's how I played Metro Exodus the first time. It's very interesting to note that Rogue Company and Rocket League, those being some very esports titles, are pretty much capped at 240 and 150 no matter the resolution, and that's what you're going to be seeing in some other results as well. But now it's time to talk about the RTX 3070 and how it does in those game titles that I just mentioned. You can see that the results pretty much stick just like in the first ones that I showed you. You're getting over 100 FPS in pretty much all game titles that you throw at it. Moving on to the GTX 1070 yet again, you're going to see that in games that are pretty much well optimized, I would even call Witcher 3 a well optimized game in this case, are running at very decent frame rates, above 60 all the time. Now, Witcher 3 I tested with the 4K graphical fidelity mods, and I can tell you that it ran very smoothly, and this game still looks beautiful, what, 5-6 years later than when it was released? Impressive. But what's more impressive is how it runs on the RTX 3070, and that's where you can see this card really shine. If for whatever reason you wanted to play Witcher 3 at over 100 FPS, you can more than do this with this card. Now, it's time to also look at 2560 by 1080, which is ultra wide in this case. So you can see that here is where the GTX 1070 starts to do a little worse in this case, and the solution to that is obviously going to an RTX 3070, and this is where the card really shines. The higher you go in resolution, the better the results you're going to see compared to the GTX 1070. And here's what I was saying, that it would pretty much be best to compare this at 1440p, 4K, and higher resolutions in this case. Now, you can see that in Far Cry New Dawn, even at 2560 by 1080, the GTX 1070 performs still very appreciable. And of course, like I was saying many times, with the risk of sounding like a broken record, just lower those frame rates and you're still going to get a very smooth performance out of a 1070. Now, going to the 3070, you're not going to have to deal with lowering your settings, tweaking all of those things. So if you want the plug and play experience, I think this is the card to go for. Now, in Forza Horizon, however, that's a very different story, because the games that are very well optimized and older titles are pretty much very easy to run on a GTX 1070. But of course, if you're aiming for 144 Hz in pretty much all of your games, no matter if they're just normal RPG or puzzle games, let's just say, well, you're getting that with the RTX 3070 at this resolution at least. Now, moving on to the big elephant in the room, this being the 5120 by 2160 resolution, you can see that the GTX 1070 can handle Forza Horizon at 30 FPS quite comfortably, which is a bit better than what you would get on the Xbox One S. So I'm not talking about the Series S, because those ones are a bit better. Now, looking at the RTX 3070 results, you can see that no matter the resolution you throw at it, for those particular games, it's going to be run very smoothly. So if you have a 60 Hz 4K panel, in this case is your TV maybe, then I can tell you that you're pretty much going to see those games run at like, what, 80 to 90 FPS in some cases. Otherwise, if you somehow have this resolution, 5120 by 2160, you're still going to get a very playable and enjoyable experience. I gotta tell you, Forza Horizon 4 at this resolution looks amazing. Now let's look at VR, because I've also included this in my benchmarks, but I've only done that for the GTX 1070, and the only two games I've included here are Half-Life Alyx and Beat Saber, and that's because those are games that I play most of the time. I've not tested this with Boneworks for this particular review, but I can tell you that that one runs smooth as well. So assuming you have an Oculus Quest 1 or an Oculus Quest 2, you should probably see these being the results. Now, I have not tested this with the 3070 because obviously if you're getting 72 Hz, which is the refresh rate on the Oculus Quest 1 on the GTX 1070, that's pretty much what you're going to be getting with, or even higher, with the RTX 3070. Now let's look at some RTX benchmarks and tell you that Bright Memory runs very smooth at pretty much every settings you throw at it, including RTX with no DLSS, RTX and DLSS on, and those are the results over here. I can guarantee that you're going to have a blast playing this game with RTX. Now, Ghost Runner is a game that I've been enjoying a lot recently, and I've played it 2 or 3 times at this point, and I can tell you that the best experience you're going to get out of this card is at 5120 by 2160 with DLSS on and no RTX, because once you turn on that RTX, performance pretty much tanks in this game. However, if you still enjoy playing a very fast-paced title at 60 FPS, then who am I to blame? You're still going to get very decent performance out of it. Now, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is an amazing game, and you can see that even with RTX on, you're staying well above 60 whenever you're turning on RTX. Now, Control is a game that I find to be mind-boggling, and aside from the story, I've been able to look into it a little bit, but when you're turning DLSS, this is where this game just pretty much shines like a diamond in this case. Even if you're playing at 5120 by 2160 with RTX and you turn on DLSS, you're going to get some amazing frame rates out of it, and I can tell you that this game looks amazing. Now that you've seen the benchmarks, I think it's also time to look at the differences in percentages to see how much faster really the RTX 3070 can be when compared to the 1070. However, you can see that when you're looking at esports titles or games that are very well optimized, you're not really getting that much out of the RTX 3070 compared to the 1070, and this is a problem whenever you're benchmarking like this. So if you see any other reviewers do this, then you might see that the RTX 3070 is not really much faster than the GTX 1070, but that's why I always recommend to look at some other reviewers and see that here, Jared from Jared's Text, thank you very much for allowing me to use your benchmark in this case. He was testing with more demanding titles like Red Dead Redemption 2, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Microsoft Flight Simulator. All of those titles I'm also going to be running on my RTX 3070, and this is how you can see that this card is actually twice as fast as the GTX 1070, and this is also what you're going to start noticing when you're upping their resolution, but not necessarily at 2560 by 1080, because that is not enough. Now, the big difference you're going to see between those cards is when you step it up to 4K, or in my case 5120 by 2160, and here you can see that I'm getting twice the performance on the RTX 3070, and this pretty much replicates the results found by Jared in his video. So yes, I can tell you that the RTX 3070 is twice as fast as the GTX 1070, but it very much depends on the game titles that you're running and the resolution. If you're planning on using this card at only 1080p and only in esports titles, then I can tell you that you're not going to be getting a ton of difference when using either the GTX or the RTX card. In this case, I think you're better off playing on a GTX 1070. Okay, I think those have been enough benchmarks, so let's just look at how well this card can undervolt and overclock. Now, I have not done a ton of testing in this case, but I can tell you that if you were going for about 975 millivolts and an overclock of over 2 gigahertz, this card is going to be stable as long as you keep the fans running at anywhere between 80 to 100%. And trust me, it's definitely not loud. We're going to get into that as well. Now, like I was saying, I was running Vermark for about 20 to 30 minutes. In this case, you can see the screenshot, and I was averaging a temperature of about 73 to 74 degrees Celsius, and this is definitely not bad for this card. But I think the best thing you can see is when you're looking at Heaven benchmark, and I am going to show you the GTX 1070 stock results when running this test at Ultra and on 1080p. So in this case, you can see that the average FPS was about 172 FPS, but do pay attention to that resolution when we're looking at the RTX 3070. These results are also stock, and you can see that I've managed to get about 256 FPS in this case, running at 2560 by 1080p. So this is well over a 50% increase in FPS, and it's been very much so stable when I was doing a 931 millivolts undervolt in this case, and also running the cards at 1950 megahertz with a 100 megahertz memory clock overclock in this case. So a really great card, but I can't guarantee you that this card, if you're getting the very same model, is going to be able to reach those results on yours as well, because this very much so depends on the silicon quality that you're getting. However, I'm also going to be doing some further testing with this card and trying to get it running stable at about 875 millivolts. But I can tell you that if you're running those settings, so 931 millivolts for about 950 megahertz core clocks in this case, you're going to see your card draw only about 180 watts, which is quite better than the 220 that it draws in stock, whilst losing only about 1 or 2 FPS, so you're definitely not going to notice that. So now that we're done with all of the benchmarks, I still need to tell you, or to remind you in this case, that I have not tested this with my CPU boosted to 5 GHz, and I've also not tested at 4K and 1440p, which is really where the RTX 3070 shines when comparing it to the GTX 1070, but you should still be getting an accurate picture of what you can expect when upgrading from a GTX 1070 to an RTX 3070. However, as I always say, do make sure to also watch some other content creators talking about the RTX 3070 to get the best idea of what you can expect from such a card. Now, I have also done something special for you guys, being I took my time to read your questions in this case, and I have them on my phone. So how about we answer some of those? And the first one is like, Furmark, stable temps. Well, I can tell you that I've done this already in the video. After 15 or 20 minutes at stock, I've only been able to see this card hit about 73, 74 degrees Celsius, but you can also get it to run at 70 to 71 because obviously Furmark is pretty much the most extreme case scenario. You're not gonna most probably see that in your gaming sessions. The next one being total card power draw, stock versus undervolt. Well, for stock, you can obviously see that online. It's 220 watts. It doesn't have any special source in this case as compared to the Asus RTX 3070 Asus Strix in this case. So yeah, that card is a bit more special in this case. When undervolting, yeah, it really depends on the undervolt that you're doing. If you were running it like me at 931 millivolts, then you're definitely going to see the card take only about 170 to 180 watts, which if you live in Germany like me, where electricity is very expensive, we're the second highest country that is paying for electricity, whatever, I don't know what I wanted to say in there. Either way, we're paying a lot for electricity, so yeah, if that's expensive, then definitely get an undervolt for the RTX 3070. This is a 1440p card, but I do think that most people play at 1080p. Yes, that's right, I don't know why I included this. Is this a premium card? Well, yeah, it depends how you define premium. In this case, I would not call the RTX 3070 a premium card. I would call, well, the RTX cards premium just because, you know, you get the RT cores, haha, whatever, all the jokes. No, but honestly, looking at the MSI RTX 3070 Ventus 2X OC, I would say that this is not a premium card just because it does not have a 0 dB fan mode, and that's really annoying because my GTX 1070 actually does, and I miss that, even though the fans are whisper quiet. And the next question is actually, how loud or how quiet is this card actually? Well, I would like to tell you that I've only been able to record the sound of this card with my phone using an app, so I don't know how accurate that is, but I can tell you that it's been quiet about 55 decibels to about 50.5 when at full load with the fans turned on to 100%, so I really enjoyed it. Can you run Crysis? Well, I'm glad you asked because I do have some Crysis benchmarks as well, and you might have noticed that I did not include them before, so here you have them. They should be running at this point. I don't know when they're going to end, but there you go. I've also tested Crysis. Hope you're happy. How does this compare to the Big Navi cards? Well, Big Navi just launched yesterday, if I'm going to upload this video on the 19th, so let's see about that. Either way, when comparing it to the RX 6800, I can tell you that the RX 6800 is a bit better in and rasterized performance, but once you're turning on ray tracing and you want to also use DLSS, psych, you can't because AMD doesn't provide that. We're going to get fidelity effects, but that's going to take a little bit longer from my understanding. And yeah, just strictly talking about the results, I can tell you that I would still go for the RTX 3070 just because I also want to use NVIDIA's broadcast software. I want to be using the CUDA cores to accelerate all of my other productivity tools that I'm using. So there's a lot of reasons for which I would go with NVIDIA in this case and with the RTX 3070. However, it's safe to say that the RX 6800 from AMD is going to deliver very good performance if you're only targeting gaming and not caring about RTX or using any other programs in this case. Of course, there are very specialized things where you can also use AMD, but most of the time I think if you want to get an AMD card, you're only going to be sticking to gaming. Yeah, I don't see any other questions being thrown around here. I'm trying to find any others. Well, nope. So let's just talk about another big elephant in the room, and that is availability for those cards. Now, the RTX 3070 is still to be found in some places, I would say in this case at certain retailers, especially here in Germany, whereas the 3080 and 3090 are a bit more difficult to find. However, the new RX cards from AMD, so those being the 6000 series, the stock for these is not looking all that great, and I don't know when AMD or NVIDIA are both going to manage to get those cards restocked and available at all major retailers in Germany or around the world pretty much. So it really depends. Now, can you wait for an upgrade? Then definitely wait for either one of those cards if you are strictly aiming to game on your PC. If you want to do anything else, then I do recommend to watch some other reviews where they're looking at productivity tools as well. And this is something that if you are interested in seeing, that just let me know in the comments down below, and I might also be looking at performance in DaVinci Resolve, V-Ray, Maya, Blender, whatever you want me to test it at. As long as it's a free tool or I can use it freely in this case, then I'm going to test it for you guys if you're interested. Now, I can tell you that in DaVinci Resolve, this card is about twice as fast, I would say, than the GTX 1070, or at least it felt that way to me. I have not actually tested to see the exact results. I know we also need to wrap up this video at this point because it's getting far too long, but I wanted you guys to know all the things that there is possibly to know about the GTX 1070 and the RTX 3070, so that's why I did it this way. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if there are any other things that you'd like to see being tested on this channel with regards to these cards, especially the RTX 3070, then just make sure to leave a comment in the comment section down below, and of course subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this one. Leave a like, share it with your friends, whatever floats your boat in this case. Either way, this has been Alex with the Red Elk. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.